Hello, everybody. This is Dwayne Musino again, and this time I'm going to be reading a short story to you called A Small Tale. It's a pretty decent story. I like it. It's one of my favorites, too. It has different ways you can interpret it, visually stimulating on one, two, three, four different levels. And it's a storyline that comes together from parts. You'll see it you'll understand it when you read it over and over again, or you can hear it over again. It's on my website as well, shortstoriescreation.com. All right, here's what's going on. First, I'm going to delete that off of there. I'm on a PC, so they have pop-ups. So here we go. Again, it's called A Small Tale. Hope you enjoy. A small tale. A blast of air pushed the tall grass forward as a light rain was forecasted today and revealed. Thundercloud could be heard for miles in either direction. Thunder could be heard for miles in many directions, which meant staying indoors. Sometimes, being only 5 years old, it feels so gloomy sitting in the house. The rain slowed. Young Billy looked out of a small window at trees moving in the wind. He needed a friend to play with. Back in the city, there were other boys his age, but now his parents lived in the Australian outback, and friends of any kind were far away. Billy wanted to play outside, so he put on some old shoes and ran out the door, forgetting his coat. He walked out a ways towards some tall grass, just past an old barn his family owned. A blast of air pushed the tall grass forward as a light rain was forecasted today and revealed. A family of kangaroos. The mother, who was immediately aware of Billy's presence, jumped to her feet to run, and then he saw two young joeys, or baby kangaroos, one in the pouch of the mother and the other on the feet of the mother, for she was keeping them warm away from weather. The mother watched Billy very closely, so he did not touch her children. Billy remembered his father telling him about the wild animals around the ranch and to not disturb them. As thunder sounded and lightning flashed, the joey on the ground awoke and saw a shadow near the tall grass. He was not scared. He could smell strange odors, all being new to him and his sister, being only 3 years old, but he wanted to see this shadow and smell it all the same. He could easily use his new claws to protect his mother and sister if the strange thing attacked them. As thunder once again sounded, Billy backed away, and to the joey, the shadow moved into the grass. A strange vision from an attacker to stare and leave. He had to follow and investigate the shadow, but he had to wait for Mom to go to sleep first. Billy's mother was calling his name at the front door, for Billy had left it open all night. He had, he had, all right, let's try it again. He, he ran to his mother, all dripping wet, and promised to dry himself, for he was a young man now. His mother noticed he had no coat on and threw a towel around him and made him some soup, then put him to bed early for making her worry. As Billy ran to his front porch near some big trees, a tiny protector investigator was watching from a distance. As the door closed, he tracked the shadow's scent to the porch and then heard a familiar snarl. His own mom followed him and picked him up by the neck hair with her teeth and put him in her pouch with his sister. Okay. I forgot how funny this is. I'm actually in tears laughing. Sorry. Uh, so he could do no harm, and she could get far away from this place, to her safe home beyond the tall grass. She paused to look into a window and saw a female being drying its young by by turning its head back and forth. She turned and said, "Strange beings," and ran home. Inside, Billy's mom was drying his hair with a towel. As she saw through the glass a small animal, uh, I'm tearing, I'm laughing so hard. I forgot about the story and what it had in it. I'm sorry. All right, let me try that one spot. All right, here we go. Inside, Billy's mom was drying his hair with a towel, and she saw through the glass a small animal looking inside. And then it ran away towards the barn. Soon Billy's father would be home, and supper would be at 7 p.m. At supper, young Billy only thought of his adventure and seeing the baby kangaroos, and not to his mother's questioning about why he ran outside and in the rain without a jacket. He just said, "I don't know." His father sent him to bed after supper, and meanwhile, in the tall grass, the little Joey's mom was not happy about her little runaway. He, wa- he wanted to run and investigate all shadows. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm laughing too hard. I'm crying because I'm laughing so hard. Uh, all right. His father sent him to bed after supper. And meanwhile, in the tall grass, the little Joey's mom was not happy about her little runaway. He wanted to run and investigate all shadows, but his mom sent him to her pouch early this evening. Early risers, both the mom of the little Joey and a very wealthy rancher who liked no guests or pets near his place. In the morning hours, he would tend his crops and get set for work for the holidays. They were near. He heard from no one at this time of the year. His two children, son and daughter, lived far from home and hardly ever called him. This morning he walked on the pond, frozen over due to the cold, but very thin ice. The town store was across the pond. He figured a shortcut. Little Joey's mom, every morning he figured at 5:30 a.m., left her young hidden together for warmth, so she could scout for food for the Joeys. Unnoticed to her, the tip of her tail caught the investigator in the nose. As she turned, and soon as she was gone, the Joey was out seeking shadows. His sister followed, awakened by movement. Together they could not walk. Together they followed the tall grass toward a slippery ground. They could not walk on it. You can guess what that is. So they stayed on the dirt. Neighbors, each other, Mr. Johnson and Billy's parents, ranch border the pond at each end. Billy's father was at work patrolling the streets as a police officer, and his mom was given a shortwave radio, which linked to his car radio for emergencies. Billy awoke from a nap and walked to a window, which overlooked the pond, and saw Mr. Johnson crossing the ice, and saw his friends from yesterday, and ran to see them near the door. Billy ran past his mom doing the laundry out past the door. At that moment, the ice gave way and Mr. Johnson fell inside. No one saw except two investigative eyes, still watching from the dirt. The little Joey walked toward the splashing beam. Okay, let's try this again. All right. Inch by inch and sliding on the ice, young Billy stopped and saw Mr. Johnson splashing and calling for help from the cold water, and his friend on the ice in danger, too. Billy's mom picked up a basket of clothes and saw through the door her son as he ran, and little kangaroos on the ice, one out by the hole in the ice. Alarm hit her, and she ran to her son and stopped him just short of the ice. As she questioned him, he said his friend was in danger. He could help him. Who? She said, Billy said, baby kangaroo. See? He pointed to the hole in the ice, and a baby kangaroo was stuck on the ice. She called on the radio for her husband, said emergency, baby kangaroo trapped on the ice. Billy's father, with siren calling morning, arrived in minutes and found the kangaroo Joey. And looking at a red shirt in the cold water, he ran to his truck, pulled a rope out, and tied one end to a tree. And the other to the end of his truck. He pulled a rope out and the other to himself. He crawled on his stomach to the hole. He pulled at the shirt and saw Mr. Johnson. He pulled him slowly toward the shore on the ice, not to break it, then performed CPR on him. Mr. Johnson was unconscious and in shock. Billy's father called a local hospital and sent Mr. Johnson to be treated as soon as possible. Now Ray, Billy's father, had one more to rescue. This curious hero, investigator, protector. From the thin ice and found on shore a female kangaroo, same size as the Joey, all the while little Joey's mom was looking for her two children and came to the sister on the shore. She hissed warning and pulled her young into her pouch and was off into the tall grass near the old barn. 2 weeks later, Mr. Johnson was released from the hospital. While he was in his next of kin, children were notified of the accident and flew separately to the father's ranch and waited for his arrival. As Mr. Johnson pulled into his driveway, he was puzzled to who found him in the water and alerted help so soon. He turned to Bilton's ranch, Billy's house, and asked his mom. She said her son was trying to save his friend from falling into the ice. Then Mr. Bilton arrived and they told of the little Joey. Mr. Johnson thanked the Biltons for saving his life and invited them to his ranch for the holiday. For it was Christmas Eve today, Mr. Johnson called from a payphone and went to his ranch. His children rushed outside to greet him. His tears ran down freely, and hugs were given, and stories told of a big rescue and a curious little Joey who helped to save his life. Hours later, as the Biltons arrived at supper, Mr. Johnson made all introductions and commented that the land that the kangaroo family is on is his property, and ordinarily he would have no part of it. But since it weren't for a certain Joey, Mr. Johnson himself wouldn't be a part of it either. So I've called earlier today so our mutual friends can have a new home for the holidays on my ranch, if they so choose. Everyone was happy at the announcement, including Billy. A toast to Joey for his God-given gift of curiosity. Billy snuck away from the table and walked to a near window. The old barn he thought his parents owned, Mr. Johnson has given a home to his friends. Billy smiled and said, "Merry Christmas," to his little friends. Each morning after, Mr. Johnson had an extra chore, and he took great pleasure in it. As the mom Joey came to feed her young, lots of food were placed close by the barn, so as not to let curious minds travel too far. Dwayne T. Messino, January 26, 1998. Finished at 4:05 in the morning. A Small Tale. Well, folks, that was something else. Talk about bringing the tears, laughing and tearing at the same time on both of them. That's the Small Tale, a Small Tale. I hope you enjoyed that reading. I have one more I'm going to do tonight. It's going to be a little bit different than this one. It's going to be a little bit more in depth. This one was a tearjerker and make you think, but the one I'm bringing up next is a little bit longer, and it makes you think on different platforms. It has a lot of morals in it, and it's kind of like this one, children based. Everything I do is pretty much you can read with children, but it's going to be called Flight into Imagination, Flight or Fiction. That's what the name of it is, and it's coming up next on the next video. Everybody, thank you for joining, and have a good day now.